The studio air thickened as Trump leaned forward, his smirk morphing into something sharper, more dangerous, and Jimmy Kimmel faltered just for a split second, his rhythm disrupted by the intensity radiating from his guest. The audience felt it too, their laughter dying down, replaced by a collective inhale as Trump seized the moment Kimmel had unwittingly handed him. He didn't wait for the host to regain his footing, instead launching into a counterattack that turned the mockery back on its source. His voice boomed across the set, cutting through the lingering chuckles, and he painted Kimmel as a washed-up jester, a man whose relevance clung to cheap shots at giants like him. Kimmel's eyes flickered with surprise, then hardened, his posture stiffening as he tried to wrestle control back. He leaned into the desk, his fingers gripping its edge, and fired off a retort, doubling down on the statue debacle, twisting it into a metaphor for Trump's crumbling legacy. The crowd erupted again, some cheering, others jeering, but Trump didn't blink, his confidence unshaken. He waved a hand dismissively, his gesture broad and theatrical, and shifted the battlefield, dragging up Kimmel's own flops, a string of cancelled projects from years past that the host had buried under. His late-night throne, the jab landed hard, and Kimmel's smirk twitched, betraying a flash of unease. The exchange grew hotter, each man digging deeper, their words weapons in a duel neither seemed willing to lose. Trump's tone sharpened, his gestures wilder, as he accused Kimmel of jealousy, of resenting a man who'd built empires while the host hid behind a microphone. Kimmel shot back, his voice rising, his sarcasm biting as he mocked Trump's need for constant validation. The golden statue just the latest proof. The audience split, half roaring with approval, half shifting uncomfortably, caught in the crossfire of egos too big for the stage. Trump's eyes gleamed, relishing the chaos, and Kimmel's jaw tightened, his control slipping as the guest refused to buckle. The confrontation took a darker turn when Kimmel, fueled by the crowd's energy, crossed into personal territory, hinting at Trump's family, a veiled swipe at their loyalty during his recent public stumbles. The studio hushed, the line breached, and Trump's face darkened, his body coiling like a spring. He didn't hesitate, slamming back with a rude, guttural jab, calling Kimmel a talentless hack who'd never know real power, a nobody coasting on other people's stories. The insult hung heavy, raw, and unfiltered, and Kimmel's hands clenched, his composure fraying as the guest's words echoed, daring him to respond. The sting of Trump's crude insult lingered in the studio, a jagged wound that silenced the crowd and left Jimmy Kimmel visibly rattled, his knuckles whitening against the desk. He tried to mask it, his lips curling into a forced grin, but the tremor in his posture betrayed him, a crack in the armor he'd worn so effortlessly until now. Trump saw it, his eyes glinting with triumph, and he pressed his advantage, leaning back in his chair with a casual arrogance that made the room feel smaller. He didn't let up, his voice booming as he dissected Kimmel's career, framing it as a flimsy house of cards built on snark, not substance, a jab that turned the host's wit into a liability. Kimmel scrambled to regain ground, his tone sharpening, as he flung back a barrage of barbs, targeting Trump's rally flop again, painting him as a clown whose golden statue couldn't even stand upright. The audience rallied, their laughter a lifeline, but it was thinner now, edged with tension, as Trump absorbed the hits without flinching. He waved them off, his hands slicing the air, and pivoted, his attack growing more personal, more vicious. He mocked Kimmel's late-night slot, calling it a graveyard for has-beens, a place where real players like him didn't need to beg for relevance. The crowd gasped, some booing, but Trump fed off it, his energy swelling with every reaction. The host's face flushed, his cool unraveling as he snapped back, accusing Trump of dodging accountability, of hiding behind bluster while the world laughed at his missteps. He leaned forward, his voice loud, almost desperate, and the exchange turned into a shouting match, each man's words overlapping in a chaotic tangle. The crew shifted nervously backstage, the director's hands hovering over the controls, but the live feed rolled on, capturing every second of the meltdown. Trump's grin widened, predatory now, as he sensed Kimmel's frustration boiling over. A misstep, he could exploit. Then Trump dropped the hammer. He stood, towering over the desk, and unleashed a scathing tirade, his voice dripping with contempt as he labeled Kimmel a coward, a man too scared to face him outside the safety of his scripted bubble. The accusation was brutal, laced with a rude edge that sliced through the host's defenses, and Kimmel froze, his retort dying in his throat. The audience held its breath, the silence deafening, as Trump loomed, daring him to respond, his dominance palpable, a guest turning the table into his own stage. The studio lights seemed to dim under Trump's shadow as he stood, his frame dominating the set, his voice still ringing with that brutal, rude condemnation that had left Jimmy Kimmel speechless. The host's freeze lasted only a heartbeat, but it was enough, a crack Trump pounced on with relentless glee. He paced now, his movements deliberate, theatrical, turning the stage into his arena as he hammered Kimmel with a barrage of disdain, calling him a puppet of the network, a man whose only power came from a teleprompter. The audience murmured, some jeering, others stunned, their allegiance fracturing as the guest's audacity swallowed the room. Kimmel jolted back to life, his face a mask of fury, and he rose too, slamming his hands on the desk, the thud echoing through the mic. He fired back, his voice raw, accusing Trump of projecting his own insecurities, a washed-up figure clinging to past glory while the world moved on. The crowd roared, split down the middle, their noise a chaotic soundtrack to the escalating war. Trump didn't retreat, his eyes locking onto Kimmel's, and he laughed, a harsh, guttural sound that dismissed the host's rage as childish. He leaned in, his presence suffocating, and twisted the knife, mocking Kimmel's emotional outburst as proof he couldn't handle real pressure. The confrontation veered into uglier territory as Kimmel, fueled by the insult, lashed out, bringing up Trump's legal tangles, his voice dripping with venom as he painted the guest as a fraud unraveling under scrutiny. Trump's face tightened, the first hint of a chink in his armor, but he recovered, fast, his retort cutting deeper, more personal. He sneered at Kimmel's life, his family, his quiet nights in a Hollywood bubble, contrasting it with his own relentless hustle, a jab so rude it drew sharp gasps from the crowd. Kimmel's eyes flashed, his body trembling with barely contained anger, and he stepped around the desk, closing the gap, the physicality of the moment electric. The crew froze, the director whispering into his headset, but the cameras stayed rolling, capturing every second of the standoff. Trump held his ground, towering over Kimmel, his smirk daring the host to swing, to prove he wasn't just talk. Kimmel's fists clenched, his breath ragged, but he stopped short, the weight of the live broadcast anchoring him. Trump saw the hesitation and pounced, his voice booming as he declared victory, calling Kimmel a quitter who'd never measure up, a final blow that left the host exposed, his authority crumbling before millions. The space between Jimmy Kimmel and Donald J. Trump crackled with raw tension, their standoff a frozen tableau under the studio's unforgiving lights. Kimmel's fists hovered, his breath heaving, but the invisible leash of the live broadcast held him back, and Trump's smirk widened, tasting the host's restraint like blood in the water. He stepped closer, his bulk shadowing Kimmel, and unloaded a fresh volley, his voice thick with scorn as he branded the host a spineless relic, a man who'd crumbled the moment the game got real. The audience split wider, some shouting support, others hurling boos, their chaos amplifying the moment as Kimmel's face burned red, his control slipping through his fingers. He snapped back into motion, retreating behind the desk, his movements jerky, but his voice steadied as he tried to reclaim the narrative. He accused Trump of dodging the real issue, his golden statue flop a symbol of hollow bravado, and leaned hard into the crowd's lingering laughter, desperate to rally them. Trump didn't budge, his stance unshaken, and he countered with a brutal twist, claiming Kimmel's obsession with him was envy, a sad attempt to stay relevant by riding his coattails. The jab landed like a punch, and Kimmel's eyes narrowed, his retort sharper now, digging into Trump's ego, calling him a narcissist who'd rather build monuments than face facts. The exchange grew feral, their words colliding in a storm of insults, each man probing for a fatal wound. Trump's hands slashed the air, his tone rising as he mocked Kimmel's audience, calling them sheep, lapping up cheap comedy. A rude swipe that turned heads and drew a wave of jeers. Kimmel seized, it spinning the insult back, his voice loud as he defended his fans, framing Trump as an outsider who'd never understand loyalty. The crowd cheered, a brief surge of unity, but Trump laughed it off, his confidence a wall, and he doubled down, accusing Kimmel of pandering, of needing applause to feel alive, a personal cut that stung deeper than the host let on. Kimmel's jaw clenched, his fingers digging into the desk, and he pushed back with a final gambit, bringing up Trump's rally crowd, small and dwindling, a desperate grasp at flipping the humiliation. Trump's eyes flared, the first real crack in his armor, and he loomed over the desk again, his voice dropping low, menacing, as he unleashed a scathing rebuttal. He called Kimmel a loser who'd never fill a room without a script, a nobody whose career peaked mocking better men, and the crowd hushed, the weight of his words sinking in, leaving Kimmel exposed, his comeback faltering as Trump's dominance solidified. The studio pulsed with the aftermath of Trump's venomous takedown, his words hanging heavy as Jimmy Kimmel stood behind his desk, his face a storm of fury and humiliation. The crowd's hush was suffocating, their eyes darting between the host, struggling to regroup, and the guest, radiating a smug certainty that filled the room. Trump eased back into his chair, his posture relaxed, but his gaze unrelenting, daring Kimmel to climb out of the hole he'd dug. The host's hands trembled slightly, betraying the calm he tried to project, and he forced a laugh, thin and brittle, as he grasped for a lifeline, anything to turn the tide. He leaned forward, his voice tight, and tried to pivot, steering the argument back to Trump's rally disaster, framing it as a clown show that exposed his guest's fragility. The audience stirred, a few clapping, but the momentum was gone, their energy sapped by Trump's earlier blow. The guest didn't flinch, his grin widening as he swatted the jab away, his hands gesturing grandly as he recounted his own version, spinning the statue collapse into a tale of resilience. A man who'd risen above chaos while Kimmel sat safe in his cushy studio. The crowd murmured, some nodding, and Kimmel's eyes flashed, his frustration boiling over as he saw his grip slipping further. The host pushed back, his tone rising, accusing Trump of rewriting history, of dodging accountability. With every breath, he stood again, pacing now, his movements sharp as he tried to reclaim the stage, pointing at Trump like a prosecutor cornering a suspect. But Trump was ready, his voice cutting through the noise as he fired back, calling Kimmel a hypocrite, a man who'd built a career on tearing others down while pretending to be above it all. The accusation was laced with a rude edge, crude and personal, and it hit Kimmel hard, his pacing halting, his shoulders tensing as the guest's words echoed, unrelenting. Trump sensed the kill, rising once more, his bulk commanding the set as he delivered the final blow. He painted Kimmel as a small-time player, a late-night footnote who'd never match his reach, his power, his life, and the crowd gasped, the insult so raw it stripped away the host's veneer entirely. Kimmel's face drained of color, his hands dropping to his sides, and he sank back into his chair, the fight draining out of him as Trump stood tall, victorious, his smirk a crown he'd wrested from the host's grasp. The cameras zoomed in, capturing the defeat, the triumph, the moment one man broke another live on air. The studio lights bore down on Jimmy Kimmel as he slumped in his chair, the weight of Trump's final, crushing assault pinning him there, his face a mask of defeat, etched in real time for millions to see. Donald J. Trump stood over the set, his victory palpable, his chest puffed out as he soaked in the moment, the crowd's stunned silence, his trophy. The cameras lingered, unblinking, catching every flicker of Kimmel's unraveling, his hands limp on the desk, his eyes darting to the audience that had once been his shield, but now sat divided, some cheering Trump's dominance, others too shocked to react. The guest had turned the table into a throne, and Kimmel, for once, had no comeback, no quip to claw back control. Trump didn't sit, didn't relent, his voice booming as he addressed the room, framing the night as proof of his unshakable strength, a man who'd walked into the lion's den and tamed it, He gestured broadly, his hands claiming the space, and praised himself. A warrior who'd faced Kimmel's barbs and left him broken. A spectacle the host would never live down. The audience stirred, their noise swelling, some rising to their feet, drawn to the raw power radiating from him, while others glared, loyal to Kimmel but powerless to lift him. The crew scrambled backstage, the director barking orders, but the segment rolled on, live and unscripted, a train wreck too gripping to cut away. Kimmel tried to muster something, his voice low, almost pleading as he accused Trump of cheap theatrics, a last gasp to salvage his dignity. But it fell flat, drowned by Trump's laughter, loud and unrestrained, a sound that buried the host deeper. The guest leaned in one last time, his tone dripping with mockery as he thanked Kimmel, not for the platform, but for proving how small he was, a parting shot that sealed the embarrassment. He turned to the crowd, arms wide, basking in their roars, and strode off the set, leaving Kimmel alone, the desk a wreckage of his shattered reign. The show stumbled to a close, the band playing weakly as Kimmel forced a smile, his eyes hollow, waving to a crowd that clapped out of habit. Not heart. Backstage, the silence was heavier, his team avoiding his gaze, the night's fallout already rippling online, clips of Trump's triumph exploding across screens. But for Trump, it was a coronation, a story he'd spin for weeks, a talk show, host humbled by a guest who'd refused to bend. The studio emptied, the lights dimmed, and Kimmel sat alone, the echo of Trump's victory, a bitter anthem, a triumph complete, undeniable, and final.